The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this web clinic. Coordikids is committed to provide the information and strategies to help as many children as possible. Make sure that your speakers or headphones are connected to your computer and that your computer's volume is turned up. You do not need a microphone. Everybody except me are muted. We'll email a link to the recording of this web clinic within the next week, and then you can listen to that again. You can make use of the question box to ask questions at any time during the web clinic. However, I shall not be able to view the questions before the end during question time. I'll keep you busy with my slides and voice for about 30 minutes. Thereafter, I'll answer your questions. You can also contact me via email at marga@coordikids with any questions or concerns that you might have. I'll answer these individually and your privacy will be valued. Use the menu on the right of your screen, which looks like this. You can check your sound in the box as indicated. Post your questions in the box marked Questions. Please do not use the chat box, as I shall not be looking at the questions before the end. The slides are available for you to download at this time. The slides are numbered so you can relate your notes to the slides at a later time. We are a large crowd, which is exciting. I hope this web clinic will give you insight in the movement avoiders to help you and the children in your life. Okay, so I'm Marga Gray, a pediatric occupational therapist. I have been an OT with a keen interest in sensory integration and sensory processing for many years. Actually, I'm talking in decades and not anymore in years. I'm also a mother of 3 adult children and 4 gorgeous grandchildren. My latest focus is Coordikids, as I want to help as many children as possible, and online programs are the easiest and effective way to reach many children. Coordikids is committed to provide information and strategies to help as many children as possible. We rely on many years' experience and on the latest research to ensure that the information we provide, our programs and our advice are the best and the most relevant to help your child and all the children in your care. Now, this web clinic is one in a series of short web clinics on sensory modulation presented by Coordikids. Previous web clinics in this series have discussed movement-seeking behavior and tactile defensiveness. The umbrella term sensory processing disorder, or SPD, was explained in the first in this series. You are most welcome to contact us to receive a recording of these web clinics to ensure that you understand where avoidance of movement fits in under this umbrella. SPD is a condition in which the brain has trouble receiving and processing information from the senses. The modulation of the sensations is one of the pillars of sensory processing disorder. Sensory modulation disorder leaves many children with symptoms of anxiety, with concentration issues, and with poor coping skills for social and school environments. Parents are often in despair as they find it difficult to understand their child and to cope with the child's issues. Sensory modulation is a neurological function and is the organization of sensory information for ongoing use. One of the behaviors that we observe in children with a sensory modulation disorder is the avoidance of some movements. These children are often not readily recognized as having problems. They usually do not disrupt a class. They tend to bottle up emotions rather than displaying the emotions. In girls, it is often seen as typical of a little girl to enjoy quiet play rather than rough and adventurous games. Boys are often seen as being babied by a parent or just slow to mature. These observations are often accurate and the behavior nothing to worry about. However, if a child's functioning, anxiety levels, or happiness is affected, it is time to look further into this, and intervention might be crucial to ensure success and optimal development of skills. So I'll try to give you an accurate description in the absence of a formal definition of movement avoiding behavior. We'll discuss some reasons why Dozy finds some games that involve movement challenging. Dozy might look as if she is manipulating adults or friends at times. On other occasions, she is stubborn and refuses to participate. However, she often looks anxious and unhappy. We'll try to put light on these behavior tendencies. Then we'll discuss the various options to help Dozy. But first, I want to briefly give you some background on sensory processing disorder for those who haven't had the opportunity to listen to the first webinars. Movement avoiding is part of sensory processing disorder, or SPD, and it is common amongst the SPD population. They usually have problems with some of the other aspects of SPD as well. Thus, it is important to see movement avoiding tendencies as part of the bigger concept of SPD. And then towards the end of this webinar, we'll just discuss on how can we help this child. SPD, as you all know by now, stands for Sensory Processing Disorder. We have discussed this condition in detail in the first web clinic in this series. If you did not listen to it, please send your interest to receive a free recording as soon as possible. I'm going to recap on SPD very quickly. The process which sensory information is sent to the brain, the processing of this information in the brain, and the messages sent back to the body is called sensory processing. If there is something wrong with this process, we call it sensory processing disorder, or SPD. The nosology of SPD was compiled by Miller and others. I have used it in the first web clinic of this series, where we have discussed all three disorders under the umbrella of SPD. The present series of web clinics are focused on the modulation disorders. The first in the series on sensory modulation disorders was a web clinic on the modulation of movement. We met Zigzaggy, our active and movement-seeking boy. And then we met Snog, the girl, with tactile defensiveness. And okay, today we'll meet Dozy. So in the previous web clinic, we have covered the sensory thresholds. Dozy has a low threshold for movement experiences, and she presents with high alertness levels. She is oversensitive in some situations, tends to be anxious and easily overwhelmed, and react with defensive or stubborn behavior at times. If you have listened to the web clinic on Ziggy, the movement seeker, he had a high threshold, so he was seeking more and more movement, whereas Dozy is avoiding the movement. Dozy tends to often be in the fight or fright mode. This can present with shallow breathing, sweaty hands, poor concentration, and difficulty to interact appropriately with others at times. She often avoids situations and prefers to play on her own. She's often a typical bystander, observing others but not interacting in the game. She's dependent on her mother's support and is often clingy in unfamiliar and some familiar situations. Dozy presents with a low threshold in most movement activities. These include a fear of unpredictable movement and heights. She's also sensitive to textures in food and can be anxious in noisy environments. She cries and looks terrified when her feet doesn't touch the ground, for example, on carnival rides, some movements in gymnastics, and she is extremely cautious when on a trampoline. She prefers to hold on to an adult. Now, what I am describing here is Dozy. It's of course not her real name, but it actually is a real girl, and I have seen her in therapy. So you might see other children who have similar issues, but not exactly the same, because no two children are the same. So don't worry if it's not exactly the same, but it can still be a movement avoider. As most other children with problems with a form of sensory processing disorder, Dozy presents with a high threshold for deep pressure on her skin. She often leans into her parents when watching TV and tends to overdress for the temperature. Dozy can be deeply involved in some activities, such as watching TV or playing with Lego. During these times, she seems to be in her own world with poor attention to the area around her. Dozy often reverts into her own world for pretend play with her dolls and soft toys. In general, sensory modulation disorders fluctuate from day to day and even from hour to hour. Dozy behaves quite differently at home and at school. It seems as if she can keep herself together at school, but when at home, she displays tantrums, meltdowns, and anxiety. However, there are a number of activities at school in which she refuses to participate, such as swimming, and she often complains about a headache to avoid physical exercise classes. Let us discuss movement avoidance, also called gravitational insecurity. We'll discuss a definition of this term and then also have a look at how Dozy reacts to this condition. Movement avoidance or gravitational insecurity is an irrational fear of change in position or movement. Dozy is happy to be a spectator when other children are playing on swings or on climbing equipment. She's often found in the sandpit or on her mother's lap while others are exploring equipment. These children are often fearful of having their feet leave the ground or having their head tipped backward. Dozy does not like swings, slides, or any movement where she is not firmly planted. She enjoys moderate movement on one of the swings in the park close to her house, but refuses to go on unfamiliar swings or slides. Some children do not want to learn how to swim. They are exhibiting the same insecurity when in water, so floating can be frightening for them. Dozy only enjoys water when she can stand in shallow water and when she is certain that nobody will expect her to float or to lift her feet off the floor of the pool. So Dozy prefers to be quiet, to sit still, to play in her own way and often on her own terms. And as you know, that can be quite typical of a girl. At first, as we have seen, she has a low threshold for movements. We all have different thresholds for movement. Some of us love carnival rides and the thrill of racing on a jet ski. Others prefer sailing on a calm sea with only a light wind. Some of us loves the energy of a fast run or a contact sport, whereas others enjoy the slow pace of yoga or a stroll on the beach. However, Most of us can cope with all everyday movement situations, as in public transport, as in attending exercise classes, enjoying a boat ride, and many more. When our thresholds inhibit our participation in normal activities and impact on our social skills and functioning, it becomes a problem that needs to be addressed. A child learns most skills needed for achievement in school through movement. Thus, Dozy's normal development can be inhibited by the fact that she avoids movement and doesn't participate in the same activities as her peers. When encouraged, Dozy can can balance on one leg, walk on a beam, and maintain the upright position at the table. However, in an assessment of her balancing skills, she performed poorly. Thus, it takes an effort for her to perform the balancing tasks well, and she cannot focus on balance and on another task at the same time. For example, she can maintain her balance when walking on a line, but when she is asked a question or when she has to catch a ball while walking, she loses her balance and steps off the line. Dozy is a sensitive girl and feels shy when she fails. Therefore, she would refuse to participate at the next opportunity to practice these skills. Balance and movement is registered and processed by the vestibular proprioceptive system, which includes the inner ear as well as muscles and joints. Poor processing usually affects balance, core muscle strength, and the ability to maintain a stable posture in sitting and during movement of the body. Dozy had difficulty to settle in a stroller when she was a baby. She also disliked long drives in the car. Dozy used to scream in a high-pitched voice as a baby when her father played some games with her that involved throwing her in the air. And we all know that some children enjoy that very much and can't stop laughing, but Dozy hated that. She could only manage these games when she was held firmly and certainly not when she had to leave her father's hands for even an inch. She disliked any fast movements in her father's arms. She was okay when she and her father ran for short distances, as she held tightly on his hand, but screamed all the way. Dozy presents with gravitational insecurity. This is a term used by OTs to describe a child who is scared of any movement when the feet are off the floor or ground. These children often dislike being on their backs and would refuse to lie on their backs on, for instance, a platform swing. It often impacts on swimming as they have a feeling of floating in the water, and that is scary for them. Movement avoiders can become used to some movements and might enjoy these in a cautious way. For example, Dozy and her family regularly go to the park with swings. Dozy has become familiar with 2 of these swings, and although she was anxious at first, she now enjoys the movement. However, when they visit another park or encourage her to use another swing, she refuses. So Dozy avoids the movement activities of peers. She often plays alone in a room or on the carpet with dolls and with soft toys. Movement activities with peers involve many unpredictable movements, balancing challenges, and games that leave Dozy anxious. This means that she also prefers the company of adults and older children. In this company, she develops communication skills and language that enables her to reason and to problem solve in situations that she finds challenging. Adults might not realize that she is avoiding situations, as she has mastered the art of reasoning so well as to have all focus on her intelligence and not on the fact that she is avoiding a movement game once again. Dozy often watches her older siblings play games on the lawn. She laughs and enjoys the game, but when asked to join in, she refuses. Her father would encourage her by picking her up and almost forcing her in a playful way, but this always ended in tears. Dozy would revert to her mother's lap in tears and angry at the family. So yes, Dozy is manipulating, avoiding, and anxious. But these behaviors are not her choice. She is too scared to join in and has developed strategies to do what she feels comfortable with. Once again, it would have been okay if it didn't impact on her development, on her relationship with peers, and on her feelings of being happy and content. So let us help Dozy. How can we help her? First of all, we have to understand her condition, called gravitational insecurity. If the adults in Dozy's life understand her condition and truly understand why she reacts like she does and how she feels, she will receive support. We have to help Dozy to be desensitized for different movements. The last thing to do is to force her to participate before she and her body is ready. I have empathy with parents of children like Dozy, as these children can be as stubborn as a horse. Dozy was a girl who attended individual therapy sessions with me. I was very gentle and would encourage her to touch the big exercise ball, then to roll the ball to and fro in a game, and only then to slowly lie on the smaller ball. She was cautious but seemed to be okay. Then I rolled the ball just to lift her heels off the floor, not even her toes. This was enough to have her revert to her mom's lap and for her to refuse to do anything else during the rest of the session. Eventually, with many movement games that involved slow movements and where she had her feet partially off the floor and had complete control over the speed of the movement, she overcame her fear and she was soon playing appropriately with peers and enjoying outdoor games with her family. And importantly, also developing her vestibular and proprioceptive sense. If Dozy has a history of ear infections, tonsillitis, or any upper respiratory infections, it might be valuable to have her ears checked by your GP or ENT. Previous infections can leave a glue ear with extra fluid or glue-like consistency in her ear, which will impact negatively on her balance and enjoyment of movement. We have to incorporate some calming strategies to reduce anxiety levels. We'll discuss activities and strategies that you can use. Muscle strengthening and exercises to improve balance and movement skills are essential to help Dozy. And last, I'll give you some therapy interventions that will be helpful to support a child similar to Dozy. So Dozy has low thresholds for movement experiences. She might feel anxious, nauseous, scared when involved in movement. Usually movements where the child has limited control over the speed or frequency of the movement create the most severe negative reactions. The child's autonomic nervous system creates the fight or flight reactions, which cannot be controlled by the child. Our bodies naturally react by avoiding situations that provoke the fight or flight reaction. Imagine that you enter a dark room and a mouse runs over your foot. Your body would certainly have a flight or fright reaction with increased heart rate and breathing, increased sweating and more. I bet you would avoid entrance into this room in the dark. If you cannot avoid entrance, you'll put the light on or take a torch along so that you can see before you enter. You and your body would like to avoid the fight or fright reaction. Now, Dozy reverts to familiar movements or to stationary gains to avoid the fight or fright reaction. As mentioned, she would use familiar equipment such as swings, but would avoid unfamiliar and would in general prefer to play stationary games that does not expect her to have her feet off the ground or to move on unfamiliar equipment. The most difficult part to understand is that these symptoms can fluctuate from day to day. It can be associated to things that we can understand, such as a busy day, tiredness, a lack of sleep, an ear infection, or many different textures to handle. But at times we will find it hard to associate the fluctuation with anything that we can observe. We'll have to trust that Dozy has a reason for being overly sensitive on a specific day and less on another. We are not in her body and cannot judge. It can be difficult to follow the fine line between prompting and accepting her avoidance, or between discipline with consequences and leaving her to avoid some situations. Let us look at strategies to use to help Dozy to stay in a calm state with effective self-regulation. The first thing is to avoid unfamiliar movement experiences. Slow rhythmical movements can be introduced on Dozy's terms. Thus, ask her if the movement is okay, and if she says it's too fast, reduce the speed so that she can be comfortable but also feels somewhat in control. It often helps to have a foot or a hand partially on the ground or floor. Slow rocking is usually calming. In general, deep pressure is always an effective strategy to reduce anxiety levels. Weighted objects, such as a weighted blanket or a lap pad, are often effective. You also get lovely weighted soft toys. You can also massage your child. Make sure you use deep pressure and follow the child's lead of what is comfortable and what not. To wrap a child in a blanket in a tight roll is one of my favorite activities for the tactile defensive child, but also as it reduces anxiety, I often use it for the child with gravitational insecurity. It usually calms any child with anxiety. I have yet to meet a child who doesn't like this. Once again, you do not have to buy anything special. You can use and apply deep pressure by hugging your child and by rolling a ball or a roller over the child. You can also use deep breathing and yoga positions at regular times throughout the day as part of your child's sensory diet to help your child to stay in a calm state with effective self-regulation. Slow, rhythmical linear movements, the forward and backwards movements, are always calming. This is, after all, how we all naturally rock a baby to settle the baby. Eventually, Dozy learned to love to roll over an exercise ball. She was scared and anxious of this movement, but soon enjoyed the slow, rhythmical, and important, predictable experience. Controlled jumping, that is on a slow beat, or slow big jumps such as from one tile to the other, is also calming. In therapy sessions, we often make use of suspended equipment such as a hammock. Of course, the movements have to be controlled and the child should be involved in an activity and should have a goal to ensure that the movement is functional. Initially, the child with gravitational insecurity will try to avoid, but with support and the option to have either the hands or the feet on the floor, they'll soon enjoy this. I want to encourage you to use the Coordikids program. There are a few other strategies that you can use. The one is occupational therapy focused with a sensory integration focus. There they will do an assessment to see if there is any other problems than gravitational insecurity, and if it is true gravitational insecurity or perhaps something because of poor balance, because of some other problem, or because of an ear infection. Individual therapy using vestibular proprioceptive techniques is very effective and very helpful. And then the Coordikids program. And this program is the only program that I could find that address the vestibular proprioceptive system directly. It is also the only one that grade exercises to build strength and self-confidence while desensitizing the child to ensure that the sensitivities to movement will disappear. You can also use movement activities in groups, but only when the child feels in control and receives positive feedback. So as a therapist, and definitely if I am a parent of a child with this problem, I would sit in the groups before I enroll my child so that I can see how the coach approached the children and what their reaction is to children that are scared and are avoiding some of the activities. We also have providers who provide the Coordikids program in groups. So the groups will be small, between 4 and 10 children. Then gymnastics, especially for the young kids when they don't really go on high equipment, can be very helpful, but then you need to inform the coach that your child has gravitational insecurity and they might need a helping hand for a long time when, for instance, walking on the balancing beam. Then martial arts can be very good. They are fairly grounded there. Once again, talk to the coach before you enroll because the child might be really scared if they fall, for instance. And then swimming can be very helpful. You'll have to probably keep using some kind of equipment to help the child with floating. Or just take a long time before you expect the child to float. But, you know, in general, swimming is also a good activity. So sometimes I ask parents to wait with these other activities just until we have seen progress in therapy. And when the child is ready, then take them. Because if you take them too soon, what they get is a lot of negative feedback. And even if the coach and all the other kids are very supportive and help them a lot, they might get that negative feedback from their own bodies. And they might just end up feeling, I hate this, I don't like this, I want to go home. And it might take a very long time to get them positive again and to get them enrolled in activities like this. So my suggestion is to desensitize the child, to provide activities and a program for the vestibular proprioceptive senses, and then when the child is ready, enroll into groups, and then as from day one they will have beautiful positive feedback to their bodies. Okay, so other sensory processing issues. A child very seldom has only problems with only one sense. So Dozy also was a tactile defensive child, and she had a lot of problems with chewing and swallowing. So I saw her at the age of 5. So by 6 she was fine, and she just continued with her life. I don't have contact with her anymore. I'm sure she's just fine. It was a few years ago. But you need to check for other problems as well, and they can be they can have sensitivities to touch, to noises quite often also. So in noisy environments they might be very anxious, and then sometimes smells and tastes as well, which makes eating quite a problem and leave them to be picky eaters. So yes, so you have to provide the sensory integration intervention as needed. You can contact me, you can contact your occupational therapist. You need to consider a sensory diet to help her to stay in a calm and focused state throughout the day and to improve her self-regulation. And I'm saying her, of course you get just as many boys with this problem as girls. And then consider the use of the Coordikids program. Okay, future web clinics. I think I want another one. The next one will be the chewers and picky eaters, and that will be, hopefully towards the end of this month, and then November and December I want to cover dyspraxia, which is quite a big issue, and it has a lot of different aspects and a lot of different things. So I might do 2 on dyspraxia towards the end of this year, and then another one early next year. So then next year also I want to spend more time on the sensory motor disorder, and then also help you to design a sensory diet for your child. Okay, so that is this. We have some questions and answers, or questions that were sent in before the time, so I just want to go through them with you. Robin asked, she's a mother of a child with a problem, and she says her daughter loves swimming at home but refuses to attend swimming lessons. Okay, so at home there are usually not too many other children. There are usually, especially, I don't know how old your child is, but if she's still young, there's usually an adult in the pool with the child. You will probably know that your child doesn't like too much water in her face or whatever the problem might be, but just parents tend to address these problems is sometimes without really knowing they are addressing them, and they make it easier for the child. Whereas at swimming lessons, it's often, especially if it's an indoor pool, there's lots of echoing, lots of noises, lots of other kids, lots of movement, lots of distractions, and that might a child with general sensory processing problems are usually quite anxious in those environments, and they often avoid that. So I would consider having individual swimming lessons and not in a group, and then just check what is expected of her. If floating on her back is expected, just leave that for the time being and just do the activities and the aspects of swimming with which she's comfortable, and slowly build it up until the therapy or the programs that you are using are kicking in. And then Alexis contacted us. She's a teacher. She said, I have one boy in my kindy class who clearly avoids movement. How can I help him in the group situation? Yeah, that can be quite challenging depending on how big the group is. If the group is only 4 kids, then it's quite easy, but in a larger group it can be quite difficult because these children might be overwhelmed with all the noise and the movement and the activity of the other children as well. But what I would do is to make the group as small as possible, and then give him the activities like what I did with Dozy, is to just literally have the ball roll forwards and backwards and just handle the ball before I expected her to get on it. So like with a swing, you can expect him to swing another child, or to just move the swing and then just have his hand on the swing and then lean on the swing while the feet are still on the floor, on the ground, and slowly build it up. And I would refer him to occupational therapy, or at least do a questionnaire or the quiz on our website, just to see if there are any other problems, so that you can address that. And if he's in a kindergarten class, the boy is still young, step in as fast as possible, and by the time he is in formal school, he might have overcome this problem, and he might never know that he even had a problem when he was younger. And that's the ideal. That's what I love. Okay, so Bella is an OT. So she asked, how can Coordichild help a movement avoider? Well, Coordichild was developed to address, amongst others, the vestibular and proprioceptive systems, and it has a lot to do with posture, with core muscle strength. The movement avoider, there's lots of head movements which triggers the vestibular system, but because the program is developed specifically for use at home, we didn't use any big equipment, only an exercise ball. The other movements are usually when the child's feet are on the ground. So they do log rolling, they do a lot of other movements which incorporate head movements. So you trigger the vestibular system, but the child's feet are on the floor. So they will feel safe, and they will be quite happy to do these activities, and slowly they will build it up until they are more confident in other activities as well. Okay, then during the session there were a few questions. So let me just see if I can enlarge this a little bit. It's really tiny here where I sit. Related to the question, okay, let me just see. Let me get to the top. Oh, there's quite a lot of questions. Thank you all. Why did some children develop all this? Is it genetic, a brain issue in early development? This is a question or questions that I just get on a daily basis, and there are a lot of answers, and also there are no answers. So one thing can be they started all this research on sensory integration way back in the previous century, and they started that on premise because that was the time when they could keep premature babies alive, and then they saw that they had problems, and then they started the research on them. So it can be problems before, during, and right after birth. It can be things like ear infections. We see a lot of children who had a number of ear infections or any upper respiratory infections like tonsillitis or bronchitis. I see children who didn't have any issues. They normal birth, no problems there, no problem in early development, and we literally don't know where it comes from. Genetic, nobody has done research on that, but I hear it so often that one of the parents, when I discuss a child's problems, that one of the parents would say, oh, it's just like the other parent, or it would say, it's just like me when I was little. So it might be a genetic component. At the moment, I'm not too concerned where it, where it comes from. My concern is we need to help these children, and we have strategies to help them, and we have strategies to help adults as well. So just to make that life easier and to make sure that the child is happy. Okay, I hope that answers your question. So let's see the next one. My daughter has strong core strength but low leg strength. Is this common? That is very interesting. No, it's not common. What I can tell you, I don't know how old your daughter is, but if you look at the child's development, in general, motor development develops from the top down, so from the head to the feet, and also from the midline of the body outwards. So that means from the head to the feet, the baby has head control and neck control long before they can stand on tiptoe. So it develops from the top to the bottom. And the other thing is it develops from the midline outside, so you will have shoulder and hip control long before they have fine motor movements of the fingers that can hold a pencil with a mature grip. So if your daughter is still young, I can just imagine that the development takes place from the top to the bottom, and you'll have to check the hips, and you'll have to check the core muscles strength, then usually the legs are strong, but you'll probably have to visit a podiatrist as well to check her feet, because if the feet muscles are also very weak, then she'll definitely have some balancing problems, and it might be a different condition which I don't know, but you might need to check that out. I would go to a developmental physiotherapist for that. Also, if you need more information, you can contact me, and I can answer you individually in an email. Okay, so related to this question, is the low leg strength contributing to balancing problems? I think it will, because balance will be good while she's seated, so it might even be okay on a horse, for instance, when she doesn't have to use her legs too much, although you use your legs on a horse. But it might be a good idea to strengthen her leg muscles as well. Once again, depending on how old she is. So you're welcome to send me an email and we can discuss that, or to make an appointment on Coordi Consult, and we can just discuss it via Skype or phone. Okay, next question. Are these helpful for children under 5? Oh, yes, 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 under 5, absolutely. Or I love to work with the young children because, you know what, they don't know that they have problems yet, so you don't have to you don't have the poor self-confidence that you get in a 8 or a 9-year-old child. They didn't have all the negative feedback that the others have received, not, as I said before, not only from other people, but often from their own bodies. So they try and they fail, and they try and they fail. So the younger you can step in, the better. And we can address problems from a very young age. And, you know, with the little ones, especially 1, 2-year-olds, we can give parents so many tips and so many things to do at home, and they can just do that at home and come in every few months, and we can check on the development and see them for a few sessions, and then they go home again. And it's a lovely road to travel with a parent, and it's fantastic to see that child going to school without any issues. Okay, this is more or less all the questions. So you are most welcome to contact us at any time. You can send an email to info@Coordikids, or you can send it directly to me, marga@coordikids.com. You can also book a one-on-one session through Coordi Consult, and I love that. You will see my schedule in your time zone. So I think people on the western side of the United States sometimes have a problem to get an appointment at a time that's convenient for them. Then you can send me an email, and I can just organize for a time that's convenient for both of us. At some days during the week, I don't mind to get up in the middle of the night to have a conversation with you, but if I have a full day ahead of me, I prefer to sleep. So we can just discuss that, and I'm quite open for that. And then you can have a look at the Coordi class and the Coordi Kindy programs as well. But go on the Coordi Kids website and you'll find all of that. And it was lovely to spend time with you. Thank you very much. And looking forward to you to join us for the next webinars. And it's just lovely to spend time with all of you. Thank you so much, and goodbye.